When the sun dipped below the tree line, painting the sky in hues of judgment, Father Lenz announced penance. Amalia would dance for them, not in the freedom of the fields, but in the square, in daylight, until she was no longer able. She would dance for them, but not for the music in her heart. That night, the villagers gathered. Children pressed close to their parents, whispering tales of the devil's daughter. They came bearing pitchforks and torches, their faces painted with fear and fervor. Amalia stood in the center of it all, her head held high, her chin tilted like a wild flower seeking the sun. She did not beg for mercy. She did not bargain with God. She danced. She danced as the villagers jeered, their words like pebbles cast at her feet. She danced for the girl who loved the sun too much, for the child who laughed too often, for the young woman whose spirit soared on wings of discontent. She danced for herself. A long time she danced. The sky wept tears of rain, then turned to watch in silent awe as lightning split the heavens and thunder clapped its hands. For in that moment the forest held its breath. The trees bowed their heads and the animals hid in their lairs. Only the storm raged above and the girl danced below, a whirlwind of black curls and flashing eyes, a living ember defying the chill of their gazes. And then, as if on cue, the clouds parted. A shaft of moonlight pierced through the gloom and touched her upturned face. When they saw that, their shouts died in their throats. They saw not a girl possessed, but a vessel pure, and the devil danced within her. All at once, their fear turned to reverence, their anger to envy, for in their eyes, she was touched by the divine, and they, the unhallowed, were left scorched by the light. Father Lenz recoiled as if burned. His eyes, which had gleamed with righteous zeal, now clouded with terror, whispered a warning. For he saw in that girl not a heretic, but a saint. The storm abated as quickly as it had risen. The wind sighed through the trees, the birds returned to their songs, and the flowers lifted their heads. One by one, they lowered their weapons, their faces drained of color. The girl had danced herself free. And when the first rays of dawn touched her upturned face, they saw not a demon, but a girl. Just a girl. She blinked, dazed, as if emerging from a dream. And in that moment, the spell was broken. The villagers stirred, their faces hardening with resolve. They had witnessed the extraordinary, yet refused to believe. Their eyes, once filled with awe, now narrowed with suspicion. The girl was back, and with her, the memory of what they had seen. She stood alone in the circle of torches, dwarfed by their flickering shadows. Father Lenz, his gaze steady, approached her. His hands, gnarled like the branches of an old oak, gripped her arms, his grip surprisingly strong. "Am I to understand," he asked, his voice low and dangerous, "that you have walked with the devil and lived to tell the tale?" His eyes, dark pools reflecting the flames, bored into hers. Amalia looked back, her own gaze unwavering. "I am from the earth," she said, her voice clear and resonant, "and to the earth I shall return. But what I have seen in the sky is mine to keep." The villagers gasped, their faces pale in the torchlight. They had expected fear, confession, remorse. Instead, they saw defiance, pride, spirit. The girl who danced with the devil had become a creature of myth. A legend whispered around dying fires. The villagers murmured, their voices like the rustle of dead leaves. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others averted their eyes, unable to meet her gaze. Father Lenz, however, held her gaze. He saw not a child, but a challenge, not a spirit, but a test. He tightened his grip, his knuckles white against her skin. "You have tested our faith," he said, "and found it wanting. Now you shall pay the price." The villagers echoed his words, their voices rising in a chant. "Pay the price, pay the price." In their eyes, she was no longer Amalia, the woodcutter's daughter. She was a symbol, a sacrifice, a scapegoat. They locked her in the cellar beneath the chapel, where dampness crept like fingers across the stone. There was no trial, no questions, just prayers shouted over her screams and holy water splashed on skin that flinched from cold. Not sin. In Heim, mercy was not a virtue, it was a weakness, and weakness was how witches crept in. 3 days passed. Outside, the rains began. They called it the heavens weeping for the villagers' sins. Crops withered in their beds. A child was found mute near the river, his eyes fixed toward nothing. Father Lenz said the storm would not break until the devil's whore was cleansed. So they built the stake, it stood in the center of the village where the harvest market used to bloom. They gathered wood not just from the forest but from their homes. Chairs, bedposts, even toys, all fed the pyre. It wasn't just about punishment anymore, it was about cleansing, reclaiming order, ensuring that no other girl would dare to dance again. On the morning of the burning, the sky broke into gold, a cruel contrast to what lay ahead. Amalia was dragged from the cellar, her gown soaked and torn, hair matted like wet roots. But her eyes still held something fierce, not defiance but depth, as if she had already passed through this world and seen what came next. They tied her to the post, with ropes stained by 1,000 storms. Father Lenz read scripture, his voice trembling not with fear but with anticipation, and then the flames were lit. At first, nothing, just smoke curling like question marks. Then, the crackling began, dry and sharp. The fire licked the wood. It climbed like it had always, longed to touch the sky. People watched, some crying, some whispering psalms, others silent. And through it all, Amalia did not scream. Instead, she began to hum, a soft, strange melody rising from cracked lips like the last song of a dying bird. It was not in Latin, not in German. No one knew the tune, but everyone felt it. The tune wound its way through the crowd like a thread of guilt. One by one, heads bowed. Even Wilhelm turned away, and when her body finally gave in, when the flames swallowed the last of her shadow, the storm stopped. The clouds scattered as if blown away by her final breath. Sunlight fell on the village, warm and bright. The wheat that had been wilting now stood tall, and the people, unsure of whether they had just killed a witch or a saint, said nothing more. They buried the ashes in a box beneath the chapel floor. No marker, no prayer, just silence. Do you believe in witches? Of course you do. You wouldn't be watching this video otherwise. The air buzzed with excitement, the scent of roasting meat and ripe berries mingling in the breeze. In the hushed stillness of the night, under the cloak of ancient trees, they danced. The village awoke to the chilling silence of empty beds and missing souls. Panic tightened its grip. Whispers turned to screams. Accusations flew like arrows in the dark, and the villagers, consumed by fear, failed to see the truth reflected in their own trembling hands, their steps echoing an ancient rhythm, their laughter blending with the rustle of leaves. They danced to forget, to be free, to remember who they were before fear took their song. They say if you listen closely, you can still hear the sound of her steps among the grass, not heavy, not haunting, just free. But one thing is certain, she moved in a way the world wasn't ready for, and the world, as it often does, mistook beauty for threat and silenced it with fire. But songs and spirits do not burn so easily, not when they're born of joy, not when they dance with the wind. And somewhere, deep in the folds of the forest, she still does. Laughter echoed, music swelled, and young hearts beat in time with the drums. They left the ruins as they were, a stark reminder amidst the greening fields, a silent testament to their folly. Little by little, Heim faded from maps. Travelers passed without stopping. Trees grew taller, stones sank into the earth, but the memory of the girl who danced lingered, and there in the circle, a whirlwind of red hair and emerald eyes, Amalia danced. To wash away the blood from the cobblestones, to quiet the sobs in the empty halls, to drown out the screams in the silent night. No lightning, no wind, just flames blooming from within like an unspoken truth. They found Father Lenz's body seated at the altar, eyes wide, lips charred shut. Some said he had heard the song again and could not bear its weight. Others said he had seen her, Amalia, standing in the flames, unburned. With each drop, the earth wept, the wind mourned, the heavens sighed, and with each storm something shifted. The villagers no longer blamed the sky, they blamed themselves. She twirled and leaped, her laughter ringing above the rest. Her steps echoed ancient rhythms, primal and sure. In her movements, the villagers saw forgotten magic, a connection to something wild and untamed. Fear twisted there. Cheers, suspicion darkened their eyes. Their celebration turned to judgment. Their unity, a fractured web of whispers and blame. They pointed fingers at Amalia, their fear taking shape in her image. In their terror, they sought an explanation. They found one in superstition and fear, a witch. But what if I told you there is a place where they ray not born with a book in their hand and a cat on their lap? What if I told you they ray born with a song in their heart and a dance in their feet? What if I told you, like the wind, like the rain, like the seasons turning, they too are a part of nature's cycle, a part of something bigger than good and evil, light and dark, something called simply life. In a village nestled between a whispering wood and a watchful moor lived a girl named Amelie Grants, the daughter of a miller. Her laughter rang like a brook over smooth stones, and her spirit soared like a lark in the vast sky. Her hair, a tangled forest of red, her eyes, deep pools reflecting the green wood's heart. When she walked, the flowers lifted their heads, and when she danced, the very earth sang along. But then one day the silence didn't last. Seasons passed. The blacksmith's forge never lit again. Wilhelm stopped speaking. He sat in his father's shop, staring at his own hands like they held the memory of the match. Children began to hum that same tune Amalia sang, without knowing why, just in the fields or by the river or in their sleep. And when Father Lenz forbade the melody, they sang it louder. One night, bathed in the silver glow of the harvest moon, the village gathered for their annual celebration. Soon, girls began to vanish into the woods, not to die, but to dance secretly barefoot alone. And when the morning mist cleared and the birds returned to their song, then the rains would come, not to punish but to cleanse. One night, the chapel caught fire, and in the end, when the ashes settled and the townspeople gathered to assess the damage, they made a decision. They would not rebuild the chapel, and sometimes, especially in spring, people say the fields near the old village hum with music, low and distant, like breath on a mirror. And that's the story of Amalia Krantz, the girl they burned for dancing. Maybe she was a witch. Maybe not.